Kinsey Schofield here. Welcome to Crown and Conflict, a series dedicated to dissecting the most riveting royal stories in history with insight from world-renowned royal experts. We are exploring the stories that shook the monarchy and captivated the globe. I mean, real in my lifetime, I don't know if there's been a bigger story than this one. This week, I'm excited to welcome Sally Bedell Smith, the best-selling author of Diana in Search of Herself and the voice behind Royals Extra on Substack. Together, we are dissecting Princess Diana's journey to find a better sense of self and her attempts to control her public image to boost her insecurities. We'll also be exploring what character traits she might share with her boys. Sally, I love this book. You know what when I was looking for reviews on it, because I was curious to see what people said right when it came out.
Yeah.
Were they eating it up? Were they critical? Because it was 2 years after her passing, I believe, when it
Yes.
came out. And one of my favorite reviews said, there will be a million more of these books about Diana. She's too interesting, but this is the only book you'll ever need to read. I thought that
Ah,
that was so, I mean, what a great testimony of how comprehensive and thoughtful this book is.
well, thank you so much, Kinsey. It was a high pressure process. My previous books had taken 5 years a piece to write, and that one took 18 months. So I had to see hundreds of people over there, and somehow I managed to pull it together. And I really wanted to give a balanced view of her, but at the same time explore the the subtitle sort of tells it all.
Mhm.
Portrait of a Troubled Princess. And her troubles went way back,
They
and they were exacerbated by her marrying into the royal family. And then afterwards, sort of cutting loose from the royal family. So I wanted to find out what animated her and what shadowed her for her whole life, really.
Absolutely. What I took away from this book was that Princess Diana is still remembered as a loving and attentive mother who was determined that her sons would never experience the absence of emotional warmth that you just kind of were hinting at. Um, that, she just wanted to make sure her boys knew that they were loved. I feel like we get that sense based on the few things. I mean, Prince William is much more private than Prince Harry, but when you listen to the princes talk, do you feel that they felt like they were loved by their mother? Or are you overwhelmed with the sense of loss? Because there's a mixture of she was taken from me and she was the best mom, I should say, in the world.
Well, I think there were several levels. There's no doubt. And I talked to many people who said she was an affectionate mother and she tried to expose them to the world. She took them to homeless centers and she took them to visit a friend of hers who was dying of AIDS, although weirdly, she didn't tell them it was AIDS. She told them it was cancer, which I don't know why she did that. But so she definitely gave them love, but I think we can't ignore the fact that even though it was more private and less demonstrative publicly, that Charles gave them a lot of love
Mhm.
as well. The problem was their marriage, which was so riven with strife, which they saw. There was a book that was actually banned in the UK, but many people who had read it said that it was truthful. And that was The Housekeeper's Diary by Wendy Berry, which you may or may not have read, but it did cite chapter and verse about the conflict that these poor little boys saw between their mother and father, and how Diana would frequently be in tears. And that was very difficult to process. And Diana, although she was, as I said, very loving to them, she could also engage in games of one-upsmanship and say to them, who loves you more than anybody else? And they would say, oh, mommy does. Um, Pamela Hicks, this sticks in my mind because she was a bit of a truth teller. She's still very much around in her 90s and a cousin through the Mountbattens. And she once told me, and I assume this was probably secondhand, but that Charles had been away. Diana was with the boys at Highgrove, and Charles arrived and he was sort of running toward the kids, and William stopped suddenly. And Charles said, "Darling, what's wrong?" And he said, "Mummy told me I wasn't supposed to kiss you." Which, how can you process that when you're a child? So there were probably a lot of moments like that, as well as a lot of moments of sincere and affectionate, sincere affection. But I want to go back, if I can, because I think the origin of so much of Diana's emotional instability came from her abandonment as a child. Her mother left when she was 6 years old. Nobody ever really gave her an explanation. Her father was in pieces, and because he was very much a man of his generation, he couldn't really share what was bothering him. And she was trying to take care of him and giving him tea and sort of following him around the house. But she had no idea what had happened. And she naturally thought it was her fault.
Yeah.
Her younger brother was only 3, so he couldn't process much of anything. Her 2 older sisters were in boarding school, and
And chasing after
she,
her future husband.
one of them was a little later.
Hey, all, I want to share today's brilliant sponsor and tell you why I love Peak. Peak has taken a modern science based approach to wellness, creating tea crystals and superfood blends made with exceptionally clean ingredients. Their products are all about making daily health habits easier and more effective, whether that's supporting digestion, glowing skin, steady energy, or just feeling your best. Personally, hydration was always a struggle for me. I drank plenty of water, experimented with electrolytes, and even stuck to the right, very expensive skincare. Yet I still dealt with dry skin and brain fog, the worst restless nights. That shifted when I started Peak's Deep Hydration Protocol. In the morning, I use BT Fountain, their beauty electrolyte. It helps hydrate from within, smooth skin, and gives me lasting energy. In the evening, I switch to RE Fountain, the calming electrolyte, which contains a gentle form of magnesium that eases tension and helps me get deep, restful sleep without feeling groggy the next day. What sets it apart for me is the purity. No sugar, no fillers, no artificial flavors, just real ingredients like lemon juice and beetroot. Within a week, I noticed my skin looking more plump and hydrated, my focus sharper, and my overall energy had improved. If you want to give it a try, I've got a special link in the show notes for you, 20% off for life, plus a free gift with my link, peaklife.com/Kinsey. That's PIQUE life.com/Kinsey. Now back to the show. In your book, I know what you're saying, and I agree with you that these issues come from that abandonment. But the insecurity in your book, you write, in Diana's adult life, the circumstances of her birth, the girl who was supposed to be a boy,
Yeah.
assumed enormous significance in her mind as the first of a series of rejections that would splinter her self-esteem. I think that's so powerful that that insecurity starts so early. And I'm sure that that did not help when her mother leaves, because now you're feeling an additional sense of rejection. And why?
Well, exactly. And then, of course, her brother was born. She was born in 1961, and he was born in 1964.
The
And so
heir, the sought after
he was
heir.
finally the heir.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know she said all that, but I'm not entirely sure that she was all that aware. John was born in 1960, and Diana came along a year later. I know her mother was really torn up by losing a child who was born and then died very soon after. That's a terribly traumatic experience. But I do think as she got older, as Diana grew older, she looked back on that and said, well, yes, they didn't really want me because the boy who had been born a year before me had died, and I was a disappointment. But I think in her childhood, that probably wasn't a factor. I think it was something that she elaborated on as she grew older.
Mm, yeah, you do make that a note of that in the book that perhaps there are some exaggerations.
Yes, there are quite a few. She's not always a reliable narrator. But I do think the abandonment theme is crucial. And she was, for the rest of her life, trying to fill that hole in her life that the abandonment created. Because it was not only that her mother left with another man, but her father, because of his psychological makeup, was not really emotionally available to her. So she, even though he was around, um, she couldn't get a lot from him. And I'm not blaming him for that, but it was just the way he was, the kind of way he was brought up.
Right.
But that was a real mark on her. And she had a real tenuous grasp of her identity. Um, she said, among other things, that she felt I was born in the wrong shell, that I felt as if I was looking at my family sort of through a glass, that I was not part of the family.
Mm.
These were things she said, obviously, when she was much older, but I think they were probably true. Um,
Can I ask you, did you read? I mean, I know the answer to this, but I should just say, when you read Spare, did
yeah.
you get the sense that Prince Harry's ghostwriter? Because so much of what you've said already, it's screaming Prince Harry to me. So the idea of Princess Diana feeling defeated because they wanted a boy. They
Mm-hmm.
lost John, they wanted a boy. It reminds me of Prince Harry talking about how Prince Charles at the time was disappointed that he wasn't a girl. And Prince Harry's born and Charles runs off to the polo game. The idea of that abandonment reminds me of that insecurity because of abandonment, or that instability because of abandonment. That reminds me of Prince Harry, the loss of his mother and how much he's fixated on that. So, is it truly a pattern, or does Prince Harry have a very skilled ghostwriter that probably combed through Diana interviews, combed through um, Andrew Morton's book, and found some similarities based on his interviews with Harry, and almost mirrored some of those stories in Spare? Or am I just like, are my detective lenses too tight today?
Maybe, because I mean, I do think that no, I think that there was a lot of revisionism in that book. And I'll read you one quote. I want to read it correctly,
Yeah.
from somebody who, and this was almost 5 years after this person had started working as an advisor to Harry and William. And he said, William and Harry, this was in 2013, right? 3 years before Harry met Meghan. William and Harry adore each other. They were two guys on a raft on their own after the shipwreck in their family, and they made it to shore. Their childhoods were difficult, which brought them together. And somebody else who had known them for the same amount of time said something quite different. I mean, it's different but similar, that they were thrust together through their common terrors. They also have a natural affinity. They are best friends because they are so different. Harry makes William laugh. William is very, very fond of him. They have a natural friendship. They share the same interests, although their characters are different, and they have the same values. This was in 2013. And the whole time I was reading Spare, I was thinking, what was all this simmering underneath Harry that people who were around them all the time didn't see?
Mhm.
Was it real, or was it something that was um, confected in a way to make him more sympathetic? I tend to believe that they were, as brothers, very tightly bound together, and that things started to go awry when Meghan came on the scene.
Wow. I mean, and that would explain why Prince William seems to have whiplash about Harry's behavior and Harry's over the last 5 years. I mean,
Yeah,
it's you do hear that he says, I don't know him anymore, which is just devastating to hear those beautiful descriptions of these two troublemakers who figured it out. Um, yeah, that breaks my heart. What
yeah,
similarities do you see? I have this specific question because you're very kind in your book, when you talk about traits of borderline personality disorder. You're so
mhm.
balanced in the way that you discuss this. I wondered if you feel at all watching Prince William, and I don't think we see it as much from Prince Harry today, but when you watch Prince William champion for mental health access
Yeah,
and
yeah,
for the different mental health entities he works with, does it almost give that portion of your book credibility? It does feel as though they're recognizing these issues in their mother and they want to help other people because they've seen it firsthand.
yeah. I mean, they've sort of walked up to what they witnessed, but they haven't gone, they really haven't dug deep into it. And I'll just say that borderline personality was something brought to me by somebody who knew Diana very well, who had talked to a few psychiatrists and psychologists and said, somebody I know has this range of symptoms, and they are frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment, a pattern of unstable and intense relationships, markedly and persistently unstable self image or sense of self, impulsive in at least two areas, including self mutilation, which he admitted to, and binge eating, which he admitted to, and recurrent suicidal, at least ideation, if not attempts. I mean, she did talk about having gone to Beachy Head, that cliff in England, and thought about suicide. And mood swings, very much a part of her personality, chronic feelings of emptiness, which she also had, um, inappropriate uh, ability to control her anger, and uh, moments of paranoia. She, in one moment or another, exhibited all those. Now, William and Harry have both, and Catherine, have committed themselves to mental health awareness. And I think that clearly is aligned to the experiences that they had. But I'm not sure that either of them is ready. Harry gave an interview, I think, after his second tour in Afghanistan, where he said mental health, he didn't say mental illness, but he said mental health touches everybody, whether you're in the royal family or you're in the army. And this is when he was expressing a commitment to help people in the army who were suffering from PTSD or other emotional problems.
Oh, that is interesting. He also worked with Oprah Winfrey on the Me You Can't See for Apple TV, which he had started that conversation before he stepped down as a working member of the British royal family.
Yeah.
But then the actual filming took place after. So I think we heard more about Meghan and heard the trauma she experienced while being a working member of the royal family than I think they had initially anticipated when this conversation started, while they were still working members. You brought up Catherine, and I'm so grateful that you did that, because while you're talking about the instability of Princess Diana's upbringing, also we have to get into the fact that she's not this commoner that everybody says she is. I mean, she's playing hide and seek with Prince Andrew when they're children. She's around the royal family. She's on the estate, the same estate as the royal family. But there is an instability within her household. It's such a breath of fresh air to see the stability that Catherine's upbringing has bled into the royal family of today. I mean, I've never seen happier babies than her babies. They're well behaved, they're silly, they're sweet. Uh, do you think that's a testament to the Middleton family?
Absolutely. I think they provided William with the secure and stable family that he lacked. And he became very close to her father in particular. And they introduced him to really kind of middle class, conventional family life, which was totally alien to him. He was used to something very different. I think Harry sort of wanted the same thing. I think they both really wanted to have a home life that was very different from what they experienced. Um, I mean, there are a couple of ironies here that William and Catherine really began their married life at Anmer Hall, which is on the Sandringham estate, not far from Park House, where Diana grew up until her father inherited the title. And this is a house that was initially a happy house, but then became a very unhappy house when just her mother was a bolter. So there they are, sort of in the same neighborhood. And William and Catherine are bringing their children up in a very stable, loving atmosphere that was absent from Diana's life, several miles away. And Harry, too, wanted to have that. He was, as we know, he went out with quite a few women and it never really took. But he gave an interview, I think, I can't remember exactly when it was, but people were naturally asking him about his love life.
Mm.
And he said, I really want to find somebody, but I have to make sure that that person, I mean, paraphrasing him, I have to make sure that that person is the right person, and that will take time. Now, we know that it didn't take time with Meghan at all.
Yeah.
William and Catherine had 8 years together to figure out what it was going to be like for her in the royal family and to know each other. And I think that was one of the issues. I know that was one of the issues that came up between William and Harry when William had perhaps the temerity to say to Harry, why don't you tap the brakes? Why don't you see a little bit more? Because it wouldn't have taken much digging to find out how, not necessarily because her parents were divorced, that's all well and good, and many people are in that situation, but that there was so much acrimony in that family. And what turned out to be, ironically, Meghan's abandonment of her own father.
Mm.
Um, and and it's just, I think William had a point, but Harry was infuriated by what he considered his presumptuousness in telling him to slow down.
I've never thought about that Prince Harry likely has inherited similar abandonment issues to his mother.
Yes,
And he
yes,
has a wife that has shown time and time again that she has a match and she is ready to burn that bridge, whether it's Thomas Markle Jessica Mulroney, the cast of Suits, who says we no longer have a working phone number. I mean, does he live in constant fear when he has seen that there's little to no loyalty when it comes to his own wife? I mean, I'm sure he doesn't feel that way. He's obviously crazy about her, and I'm sure he
Yes, I think,
justifies her actions.
yeah.
But I would be looking at some of these things going, I better not make her mad. I better do everything she wants me to do because I don't want to end up on the chopping block.
Well, I think it was certainly the case with Diana. Diana had was because of all these insecurities, because she was afraid that people would abandon her. She was exceedingly demanding in her friendships, in all of her relationships. And if she thought somebody was critical of her or did something that rubbed her the wrong way, she would drop them. And I did for Royals Extra, I had two conversations with Lucia Fletcher de Lima, who
Wow,
was
that's great. I love that.
who was an older woman who became probably her most important mother figure, because that was another theme of Diana's life, that she was always looking for a replacement for the mother who abandoned her. Lucia was a wonderful woman, and she was very sympathetic. She was wise. She was, she was shrewd, but she had to yield to what all of Diana's other friends did, which was being on call, in effect, constantly. Diana had a need because she wanted affirmation. She wanted to be able to know that she could rely on people. So, Lucia, when she was living in London, would be doing something and would get a call from Diana and would have to go break whatever she was going to do and go have lunch with her. She saw her a lot, as did her daughter Beatrice, who was also very wise about Diana. And then when they moved to Washington, when Lucia's husband was ambassador to the United States, Lucia had to adjust her schedule 5 hours behind Diana's, so she could be available for phone calls in the middle of the night or whatever. So, she was a very demanding friend, and without judging her, I think it had a lot to do with her fear that people would leave her. So she decided she would leave them first.
Oh, yes. What I thought about when I read this in your book, Prince Harry, the reports that David Foster has become this substitute father for him in the
Yeah.
States, or even the fact that Harry is now surrounded by all of these older women constantly. There's the book agent that Meghan Godmother's bookstore that Meghan and Harry went to the opening of, and they talked about how they were like family. Even Oprah Winfrey, in a sense, although I know other people think that I'm not sure what the status of the relationship is, but it is a little odd that Oprah Winfrey and some of these people have embraced Prince Harry and Meghan the way that they have. Do you get the sense at all that Prince Harry is looking for substitutes in the same way that his mother was, in these
I think
older mentor
I think that
figures?
I think that makes a lot of sense. Mother figures and father figures, although he has a father who would very much, if I think all Harry needs to do is to apologize, and for him to have met his father after, in whatever was 19 months, and then several days later say, my conscience is clear about everything that I said in Spare and everything I said in that Netflix series, both of which were so damaging, not only to their relationships, but to the royal family in general. It was an interesting shared characteristic that Diana had. She was, as I think it was Lucia Fletcher Lima or her daughter who said she found it very difficult to forgive and forget.
Oh,
And also, after the Panorama interview, she said to Lucia, well, I probably shouldn't have said that Charles wasn't fit to be king, but she stood by everything else she said. And and I was reminded of Harry saying, my conscience is clear. Well, his conscience should not be clear.
Oh.
And the most obvious pathway to reconciliation is for him to really apologize, because that book and that series just sabotaged his relationship with everybody in the royal family.
Well, let's not forget the Oprah Winfrey interview. And I felt like
Yeah.
what made me so angry about the Guardian interview was that there should have been some sort of reconciliation earlier. In my opinion, apology, I should say, earlier. I am still bothered by the fact that when the King and Princess of Wales announced that they had cancer, Harry and Meghan kept a low profile. That's when I would have said, enough is enough. Time
Yeah.
is short. And
Yeah.
I don't want either one of us never to speak in a positive way with each other again. And the fact that 2024 was so horrible for Prince William and the Princess of Wales, but also you just talked about these two were best friends and experienced such trauma together. I'm sure you're looking for that person that's been with you throughout some of the most traumatic events of your life for support, and that person's just not there. That had to be pretty defeating.
I think it was, and I think I've thought a lot about their character differences. And one thing that I heard from people who knew them well is that William is much more sensitive than he appears. He keeps everything inside. Now, in all likelihood, he confides in his wife, who he adores, but that, unlike Harry, who wears his heart on his sleeve, William tends to be more um, guarded in the way. That's just his personality. And there was another thing that one of Charles had a lot of gurus in his career. And there was one that I found fascinating, and I'll probably be writing about him. His name was Keith Critchlow. And he said, William is 100% fair minded. He has an impeccable sense of truth and correctness and justice. And that is character.
Mm.
And I think that is one reason why we haven't heard anything from him. He just doesn't want to go out there and start rebutting Harry. Um, Keith Critchlow didn't say the same thing about Harry. He just said, oh, he's kind of fun and jolly. And this is back when they were in their 20s. So, I think it must have been just devastating for William to hear Harry's truth, which in certain moments may have been accurate, but I think in many ways may have been sort of like a recovered memory that didn't jibe with what everybody else was witnessing at the time. And it certainly didn't jibe with what people who worked closely with them were telling me back in 2013.
I would have loved if instead of recollections may vary, the Queen was like, that does not jive with my recollection. I would have
Yeah.
really appreciated that that one.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about Prince Harry's similarities to his mother, and they're not always positive. But correct me if I'm wrong, because I might be totally off on this. In your book, you write about how Diana was remarkably savvy at controlling her image through the media. I think that Prince William is too. I think he's just so good at it that we don't see blatant examples of it, like him getting out of Richard K's car. But I think that he's really great at the way that he is branded in the media.
I agree. And I don't know whether if it's something that he just fundamentally understands or something that Catherine fundamentally understands. But I agree. Every time they do something, it it resonates. And I think in the case of Harry and Meghan, it tends to grate. And and I think William does have that good sense. And I think it's really helped him. It's no accident that William and Catherine are the two most popular members of the royal family. And I think that has a lot to do with it.
You talk about how public Diana and private Diana, she struggled with that to coexist. Do you see that with Prince William or Prince Harry, or is it a different time where you don't have those as rigid expectations when it comes to the British royal family? And Prince Harry is just kind of thrown it out the window anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think William, yes, I think what we see is what we get. So many people compared him to his grandmother, the Queen, and in his sort of self-contained personality, and how really maybe he shows more of a sense of humor in private, but he's increasingly doing that now. And maybe he's just decided he's going to show a little leg and show people that he does have a good sense of humor, because I've been hearing that for years. Um, so I think Harry, yeah, in his own way, I think we're seeing Harry both private, I think his private persona is probably pretty much what we've seen in the last 7 years. And what we
Could you
saw
say that? Could you say
before.
the same for Meghan though? I think that there's an authenticity problem when it comes to Meghan.
Yes, I mean she's an actress. How
Yeah,
many how many roles is she capable of playing?
right.
And I think that's a problem for her, because she strives for authenticity, but she does these things like her TV show that kind of make you think this is not authentic. This is inauthentic. And who is the real Meghan? I don't think we know, or we do know some of what she was capable of in private, and it's not pretty.
It's not as edifying as you would hope, knowing how welcoming the British royal family was indeed towards this woman who, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm horrified when I read books like yours and I remember Diana's uncle with a microphone or a recorder in front of his face confirming to reporters that she was a virgin. I mean, of course Harry is the spare, but the expectations were so much higher in Diana's, and through Diana's journey within the British royal family, and the fact that the royal family welcomed the Markle Sparkle, welcomed Meghan, gave her that beautiful wedding, the wedding that we found out. I probably quote your Lady Elizabeth Anson coverage daily today to this day, but the fact that we found out there were so many red flags behind the scenes, and yet they still gave her this day to be this princess and celebrated her. I mean, it's just very it gets on my last nerves. It makes me very angry that she's
Yeah.
turned on them in the way that she has.
Well, not only did they give her the day, the Queen gave her really some fantastic patronages and positions in the Commonwealth, even though the Queen had misgivings about her and what her motivations were. She did her best to offer enticements. She saw a role for her, several roles for her in the Commonwealth, which the Queen considered one of her most important legacies. I think one of the worst things in that series that Harry and Meghan did was to trot out at least one expert, maybe two,
Yeah.
to say that the Commonwealth was sort of a sham, and it was just a neo-colonial force, and that was a direct insult to the Queen and everything that she had tried to build over the years. So they've been they've been very insensitive to the Queen. And
Yes.
they were before the wedding, and they were obviously, to the 10th power afterwards with all the things that they said, um, making a mockery of the act of curtsying, which Meghan did on camera. And Harry looked a little bit abashed as she was
Mortified.
doing it, understandably. Um, but let's face it, Meghan came into the royal family, and I've heard enough to know that she really didn't have any intention of staying around for very long, and that she was already beginning to make deals um, before before they left, well before they left. But the
Absolutely.
Queen, to her credit, really tried. I mean, she gave her position with the National Theater, and as I mentioned previously, those Commonwealth positions where the two of them could have really had a positive impact in Africa, the Caribbean, South Asia. There were many places where their presence would have been welcomed and would have redounded to the royal family and the Commonwealth.
Sometimes we think about Diana in the United States twirling around the ballroom with Phil Donahue. And she usually was at these events being gifted these awards for her philanthropy. Why is it so insulting for me to imagine Harry and Meghan accepting the Humanitarians of the Year award in New York on October 9th? What's the difference? What is the difference? Is it because we actually saw a life of service from Diana? I mean, she tried for 16 years. I think my timeline's right, but does it feel shallow when it comes to Harry and Meghan? Is that why I recoil when I report on these things?
I think you've just answered your question. Yes, it feels pretty flimsy. Diana obviously, moved from one charity to another. She dropped charities, but her intention was to make the world a better place. I really believe she wanted to do that. And her landmine campaign at the end of her life was very important and had an impact. And I interviewed Lord Deeds, who was with her on at least one of those trips, might have been to Angola. Um, and she was very sincere about it. She read about it, and she wanted to use her position. This was after the divorce, obviously, but she wanted to use her position in a positive way. Douglas Hurd, who is the foreign secretary, said she needed to be royal to succeed. And I think that was true in terms of the impact that she had. What was unfortunate was that as a member of the royal family and then sort of an ex-member of the royal family, um, she was just thrust into the public spotlight, all the time in a way that frayed her nerves and uh, increased her sense of, absence of self-worth,
Mm.
and just made her life difficult. I don't think she wanted to be, part of her didn't want to be a celebrity, and part of her did.
Part of her likes
Um,
Kevin Costner calling. Kevin Costner on the phone.
yes,
That did impress
she
her.
she did like that.
One final question. We've talked so much about Prince Harry, and I'm sorry that he monopolized the conversation. He tends to do that. Do you see any other characteristics in Diana that she shares with Prince William? Because some will say Prince William's more like their father, but when I see him joking in that sense of humor you mentioned, that is Diana in a neon sign above his head. That is Diana's baby.
Yes. I remember, I can't remember who it was who said to me that she did have a sense of duty, and that was something that she got from not only from Diana, but also from or that's what she got from Charles. And obviously, William has a profound sense of duty. And I think she, she imprinted that on him, and she knew what his destiny was. I mean, the great mischief that she made in the Panorama interview was to say that Charles couldn't handle being king, that it would suffocate him, that he would be unhappy, and that she wanted William to be king instead. And
Which,
she
by the
later
way,
told,
how cruel was that to do to that little boy? I mean, it's taken me years to actually come to that conclusion, but finally one day I heard that, and my mind was off the, oh my gosh, I can't believe she insulted her husband in that way, and my mind shifted to, oh my gosh, the pressure on that boy's
yeah,
shoulders. And it's been on his shoulders since the death of Queen Elizabeth, because until the death of Queen Elizabeth, people were still debating, should we just skip? And you'd see express polls, should we skip King or Prince Charles
yeah,
and go straight to Prince William? What a miserable responsibility and unfair responsibility. Responsibility is the wrong word, but what unfair expectations to put on a young man.
yeah. Well, let's face it, the whole Panorama interview was very damaging for those boys, even though she went to William and she said beforehand, "You'll be very proud of me." And he was devastated by it. And how could he not be, the things that she said, and including that, which did put a terrible burden on his shoulders and, undermined his father. So even though she was, I mean, we'll end on a positive note, she was a very loving mother, and she did have this impulse to take them outside of the royal bubble, and particularly William, who she took to Center Point, the homeless center in London. And I mean, I remember there was one year, I think it was 1993, during Royal Ascot. This was sort of typical Diana, during Royal Ascot, where Charles was there with his top hat and his morning dress, and she was taking William over to visit homeless people under a bridge, on the south bank of the Thames. Um, Now, whether that was, with a theatrical intent, I don't know, but it was
Well, I think it's fair.
something
I think it's fair to ask that question.
but it was something that has resonated with him. It was a mission that she gave William that he is carrying out to this day with his Homewards project and his vow to eliminate homelessness. It's fairly ambitious, but to eliminate homelessness in Britain. So, those were the kinds of things that she did that were very positive. And there were others, but and also, she spoke toward the end of her life. She spoke fairly frankly, not only in Panorama but in groups about her own mental health issues. And I think that it also encouraged William and Harry to take up that cause and destigmatize and urge people to get help. I mean, Harry, I'll give Prince Charles credit, even though the royal family was sort of oblivious to therapy or anything like that. But very early on, Charles took Diana to a psychologist in London named Dr. Alan McGlashan, and he really wanted her to get some help. And she was very mistrustful, sort of paranoid at the time. She went to him for eight sessions. Charles proceeded to have therapy with him for 14 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, so
And he
was
also,
it couples therapy or was it individual
no, it
therapy?
was individual therapy, but he was very important. Nobody knew about it. Only one or two people knew about it, but it showed that he was not in the least hostile to the idea that somebody should get therapy. which, if we want to bring it around to Meghan again, her saying that nobody would let her have therapy when she was feeling depressed. And I just know that that is not the case, that she had plenty of therapy available to her, including people back in California. Um, so
Well, when you talked about Princess Diana's father and that distance, but you kept saying it was a generational issue and it was also not wanting to burden your children. That's not something you would do, burden your children with your marital problems. I think the same could be said about King Charles. I mean, Harry talks about this distance or talks about this disconnect. And I think that King Charles is just from a different generation where he didn't like Prince William on the other side of the bathroom door, sliding tissues under the door because he can hear his mom sobbing. King Charles would never. King Charles internalizes that. Thankfully, he has Queen Camilla that he can lean on today, but he would have never said, "Come over here, boys. I want to talk to you about your mom's mental breakdown." That just was never going to happen. But, that's just not the type of man he is.
No, but I think he obviously felt, he felt her anguish and his own anguish, and he confided to quite a few people.
Right.
Way before the world knew about it. Um, and and as I said, having been in therapy for 14 years, he certainly was aware that it was something that could be helpful. But I don't think he would cross that bridge and talk to his own boys about it, which, as you say, was probably generational. But I mean, if they were happening today, they would certainly be getting professional help.
Oh, that is so true. I'm glad that you brought that up. And I love that you brought up. Thank you so much for bringing up how passionate Prince William is about his homeless initiatives, because it's important that we mention all of that good work that he's doing. Again, my Diana Bible, Diana in Search of Herself.
Thank you, Kinsey.
Sally Bedell Smith. If you have not subscribed to Royals Extra on Substack, you have to do it right now. Incredible exclusives from decades and decades of conversations you've had with insiders. And sometimes you revisit something and you think this is so relevant to today. And it's interesting to watch that, the cycle of some of these things that kind of pop up over the years. But I am such an admirer of yours. I can't believe you spent so much time with me. I'm sorry that I said final question 20 minutes ago. But that's
Kinsey,
how
we
good
could
you
go
are.
on for another hour
That's
or
how good
two.
you are. So
Well,
thank you.
it's just you have such wonderful questions, and you kind of, spark a great conversation.
Well, thank you. I can't wait to talk to you. Hopefully, you're not like, I'm never talking to her again. That was exhausting.
No
Hopefully, you're
way.
ready for round two because I am.
Absolutely.
I mean, we
Yeah.
didn't go through half my questions. That's how great this book is. I mean, it is incredible. The pictures inside too, I love. Would you ever write another Diana book, or do you think that this is done based on her
I mean,
her
I did it, so quite a few years ago, but
oh,
it's gratifying to think that it does hold up, because when I embarked on it, literally 3 days after she died, I didn't think anyone would talk to me, and fortunately, a lot of people did. I mean, their emotions were very raw.
mm,
I when I wrote about Lucy of Legend of Lima, she said at first, she said, I know I'm so, because she was so close to her. And she said, I don't know if I can do this, if I can talk about her, but she did. And many of them did, and they had great insights. And so that was exceedingly helpful, because I was really, I mean, I'd met a bunch of people. I'd met Charles, I'd met Diana, but I just didn't have any idea of this sort of labyrinthine tale that her life turned out to be.
well, I'm so glad that you did do all of that hard work for us because we know her a little bit better because of you. I mean it now. I'm going to finally let you go. Thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Thank you, Kinsey. I enjoyed it.
Agree with us, disagree with us, let us know in the comments below. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video with a friend.